Welcome to Cruelty-Free Claudia, where I bring the animal experts to you. I pull together elements of compassion, ethics, and science to a well-rounded experience for animal lovers and curious people like yourself. With every podcast episode with a unique and diverse interview, I hope you learn something new. Enjoy. In this interview, I speak with my friend Mindy Callison, who founded Bailing Out Benji in 2011, a nonprofit organization that's based out of Iowa, but has increasingly been working nationally to educate the public about puppy mills and the pet stores that support them. Bailing Out Benji provides free humane education presentations to schools, libraries, and other public venues, and disseminates information about puppy mills via its website, bailingoutbenji.com, and social media. In 2015, Mindy and her rescue dogs were featured in the documentary Dog by Dog, a non-graphic film that explores the money trail behind the puppy mill industry, which is now on Netflix and Amazon. In 2016, Mindy was named an Advocate We Love by the Humane Society of the United States and was featured in the January 2017 issue of Rolling Stone magazine regarding her work in fighting puppy mills. I originally intended to have Mindy explain a little bit more in the beginning of the episode about her organization and what she does, but as you'll hear, we quickly got into a detailed and inspiring conversation, and I didn't want to interrupt that. Her hard work, kindness, and doggedness, pun intended, is very inspiring to me, as I hope it is to you as well. So without further ado, I bring you Mindy Callison, founder and president of Bailing Out Benji. So hi, Mindy. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Oh, good morning, Claudia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Tired from my day yesterday.
What did you do yesterday? I saw the photos online.
Yesterday, Bailing Out Benji was contacted about some dogs that needed release from a puppy mill. And so my husband and I traveled over 400 miles to get these two puppies that would have otherwise been shot from an Amish breeder. And so we got them to safety and took them to their foster homes and then came back. So it was just a long morning in a car with lots of sad dogs.
Wow. Now, is that typical for, the Amish is unfortunately known for puppy mills, and that's sad for people in the Amish community who don't partake in that.
Yeah.
But is that typical for people who run puppy mills to, obviously they have to get rid of dogs that can no longer breed because they're not profitable to them. So is that common for them to shoot the dogs?
It's pretty common. They do a lot of different things. When breeders are done with dogs, sometimes they just call rescues like us, or rescue organizations like ours, and they ask us to take the dogs. Some breeders find it easier to drown or shoot them, even though that's not an approved way to euthanize an animal, so they could be in trouble for that. And a lot of breeders, unfortunately, here in the Midwest, will auction their dogs off like livestock or, vehicles at an auction to other breeders who will then take the dogs and take them to their puppy mill. So some rescues go to those. We have in the past, and rescued dogs from auctions as well.
So what are the laws pertaining to keeping these puppy mill dogs safe regarding to being drowned or shot or even sold at auctions?
So right now, my husband and I rescue black labs, and our black labs are held to a higher standard legally than a dog in a puppy mill would be. So in a puppy mill, like I said, we have black labs. So if you take one of our black labs and you measure her head from 6 inches above her head and then 6 inches behind her tail, that is legally as big as the kennel needs to be in a USDA licensed facility. And so as long as my lab, if she were being a USDA breeder dog, as long as she could stand up, turn around, and lay down in her kennel, then that would be legal. Whereas, when they're your pets, you have to make sure that they're being cared for other ways. Now, every state has their own companion animal protection laws, but for the most part, the minute these dogs become USDA licensed, they are not our companion animals. They're registered as livestock, as a USDA breeding stock animal. And so not only do these dogs live in small kennels, if they're in a larger kennel, one that exceeds the minimal USDA standards, then those dogs don't have to have an exercise plan. The dogs that, when you see photos of puppy mills, you tend to see several dogs in one long wire bottom pen. Those dogs never have to be let out because technically their kennel is larger than legally needed. So that is their exercise area also. And that's legal. A lot of puppy mills, what you'll find is that they have a 7-day feeder. And so the breeder will come by and fill the feeder once a week. And if the dogs run out of food, they run out of food. The water, from USDA inspection photos, we've seen, lots of water that has mold in it and algae, and these are all violations. The breeder could be in trouble for that. However, if you know much about the puppy mill industry, you know that the USDA inspectors come on the property every 2 to 3 years. So even if at one point in time they're written up for a small violation, the inspector won't come back for 2 or 3 years to make sure that that violation was fixed. So it's kind of just this big mess of, yes, they have the bare minimum of standards to protect them, but no, nobody is following up and making sure those animals really are being protected. What we're seeing more is that the inspectors are going in and making sure that the facility is okay, even though legally the laws that the breeders have to follow under USDA standards, it's called the Animal Welfare Act. You're seeing that the inspectors are coming in and just making sure that the animals are living, not thriving.
Wow, that's terrifying. Do you know of any federal pieces of legislation working to advance this? Obviously, right now is a tough time politically to get anything passed. But I know there was an uproar about USDA taking down violations, and we've got obviously the Animal Legal Defense Fund does a lot of work. So what do you think would be the most effective in getting just increasing the regulations for these facilities, or making it harder for them to exist? Because if they have to pay some kind of fee, then that for them might just be the cost of doing business. What do you think would be the most effective in getting these places shut down, either by them choosing to do so or being forced to do so?
From what we've found, the best way to hit these breeders where it counts isn't through legislation, because what we're seeing is that these breeders are already breaking the laws. One thing that they have that rescues don't, besides no heart, is that they have unlimited money. So you've got these breeders who can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year selling puppies. So if they get a small fine for being written up for a law that they broke, then it's a cost of business. So they're not even seeing that as an issue. They just know that it's something that might happen this year, and they just write it into their profit. So what we have been seeing, the most effective way that we've seen puppy mills downsize, or the number of mills in a state downsize, is through education. Not enough people even realize what a puppy mill is. And when they do realize that, they still don't realize how in-depth the problem is. They don't realize that when you walk into a pet store and they're selling puppies, that those puppies are coming from inhumane puppy mills. Because what can the pet store say? Oh, they come from a local breeder. Oh, it's fine. Oh, the breeder's down the road. It's a family friend. Technically, the pet store can lie. And there's nothing against that. The pet store doesn't really have to disclose in some states, and others you do. But here in Iowa, the pet store doesn't have to disclose where the puppies come from. And so they can be misleading in their statements to the public. And so, like I said, we found the best luck in educating people about where to humanely get their pets. If they do choose to purchase, we educate them on the difference between a reputable breeder and a puppy mill. And our phrase that we started is, show me the mommy, because reputable breeders want to meet you, and they have just as many questions for you as a rescue would. Reputable breeders, in their contract that you sign, that dog will come back to them at any time in its life. And I can attest to that. Here in Iowa, there was a beautiful Afghan hound that was in a local rescue. And so I sent it to one of my friends who shows Afghan hounds. And I was like, well, this is a dog you don't see every day. And she's like, let me do some digging. And it turns out that dog was a puppy of a reputable breeder that was in a different state. And she had sold the puppy to someone on contract, as a pet. And then that person got rid of their dog. So that reputable breeder came all the way to Iowa just to adopt her dog back that had already been spayed. And so you see that for the good guys, the good breeders that are out there, you're seeing that they really do care about their dogs as family members. They're not putting their dogs in kennels out back. They're not breeding them every single heat cycle. And so what we've been able to do, thankfully, is here in Iowa, create almost I don't want to say partnership, but an understanding between a lot of the reputable breeders who are also speaking out against puppy mills, because that's also what we need. That other end of it is every time you try to push for new legislation, every time there's a new law or anything, you get organizations like the AKC that fight it. And the reason they fight it is because they're afraid that if one law comes in, and even if it's minimal, that next year, since it's already on paper, it will be easier for us to increase those regulations. And so, you're seeing in some states where the AKC comes in and they don't want to increase kennel size of dogs in breeding facilities, or they're fighting legislation about tethering dogs or about how long a dog can be crated. And all of that kind of comes back to breeding facilities. And so another aspect of what we do is we work with reputable breeders to try and create an understanding where it can no longer be us versus them. It has to be the rescues, the animal lovers, the reputable breeders versus the puppy mills, because the puppy mills are the ones giving everyone the bad name.
Right. Yeah, the AKC, I don't know if people know this, but the AKC is the American Kennel Club, and they consistently fight against very humane legislation. I know it's 2017 right now, and Texas is trying to pass an anti-bestiality bill because bestiality is still legal in 9 states. And AKC is consistently fighting these, what you think would be obvious pieces of legislation to pass. Are you finding that there are both breeders and rescuers and different types of people that unite against trying to fight against the AKC? Because I don't think they have the animal's best interest at heart at all.
I would say unite is a really, really hard word. Obviously, I'm here in Iowa, and we've got a huge agriculture base. And everybody here is very much about protecting their business and their organization. And so over the last, Bailing Out Benji will be 6 next month. And over the last 6 years, I've tried very hard to make sure that our reputation is we are against puppy mills and not all breeding facilities or all breeders. Because even though I will always, always, always adopt dogs, and I would never even adopt a puppy because I know the seniors and the sick dogs need me, we have to acknowledge that there are reputable breeders. And because of that, we have had several reputable breeders here in Iowa reach out to us and try to mend that fence. Because right now it's very, very much us versus them. And so even if we were to try to do some kind of coalition or some kind of national thing to get reputable breeders and rescues to work better together, I think it would be very hard because on the breeder side of it, or the hobbyist or the show side of it, you're still going to get that fear that there are the animal welfare advocates that are a little more radical than others, and those radical advocates would want to end all breeding. And sadly, that's never going to happen. And so we need to make sure that we aren't painting all breeders with that same brush. And so here in Iowa, I've been able to work with several reputable breeders on projects. There's one, like I've mentioned before, she shows Afghan hounds, and she and I have become allies in this. She's gone to dog auctions with me. She and I have partnered for like the Puppy Up Foundation to fight canine cancer. We've partnered in small things like that where we know we can make the most effective change. And so if we keep doing small little events together, small little coalition type things, it sends a larger message, even if we're not naming it. Even if we're not saying, oh, we're united against puppy mills. She is able to educate within her circle, just as I'm able to educate within my circle. But combining those two circles might create more of an issue, like I said, with the radicals on each end of that.
What advice would you have for people who might be reluctant to build those non-traditional allies? How can you think of an example of how that relationship has, increased awareness or visibility or support for, taking down puppy mills essentially?
So I would say that you always have to keep an open mind. I mean, you can't see me right now because obviously we're on a podcast, but something I always say in my presentations is that we all kind of have blinders on. We all know what's important to us. We all see what's going on in our world. And no matter what the subject, we're kind of failing at realizing somebody else has another point of view or another opinion or another background. And so at Bailing Out Benji, we always educate through kindness and compassion. As hippy-dippy as that might sound, as nerdy as that might sound, I will always stick to that because there will always be someone who doesn't know about puppy mills. And I can't be mad at them because they bought that puppy, because they haven't had their aha moment yet. And that's where I come in. And so thankfully, with my friend who shows hounds, she is able to go to her circle when they have meetings and things, because they do talk about the legislation that's going on. She and a few others are able to help balance that fear that others have. Or, Bailing Out Benji has grown exponentially in the last year. We've had a lot of people who email us and they're dead set on buying a puppy. And they say, Mindy, Bailing Out Benji, I do not want to support a puppy mill. Can you help me find a reputable breeder? And as much as I want to promote adoption, and I still do send the pet finder link of that breed, and I say, okay, you look at these puppies and these adult dogs while I'm, reaching out to reputable breeders. And more often than not, they still choose to adopt. But I know that I have allies on the other side that I can reach out and say, hey, someone really wants a Bashan puppy and they don't want to buy it from a puppy mill. Can you just mention someone to me? And so then if they give me a name or two of breeders that they support and that they know are doing it the right way, I can look it up on my end and still make sure that things are up to snuff and things are good. And then I can pass it along to somebody. And, it goes both ways where I get a lot of people who are angry that we've helped people find non-puppy mill breeders. Because, breeder buy, or wait, what's the phrase? If you breed or buy, shelter dogs die. Well, we live in a society where you want it and you want it now. And this is why puppy mills are so popular, because people don't quite realize what they're supporting,
right.
But they know that they can go on a website, click a little box, hit ship, and the dog appears at their doorstep in a week. So that's kind of the mentality here in America. When you want something, you want it now. And so a lot of people may not be willing to put their name on a list at a rescue for puppies that might come in, and as much as we try, you still have to make sure people know the difference between a reputable breeder and a puppy mill. The minute you make them feel guilty for buying, then they're going to ignore the message as a whole. And so that's kind of, like I said, what the issue is on our end. You get people who are upset that we quote unquote promote breeding, when really we are just educating about the difference between a puppy mill, which we can all agree is inhumane and horrible, and a reputable breeder who has 2 or 3 dogs that are kept as pets. And so we just have to make sure that we see that world of gray area. It's not black and white. Not everybody is a bad guy just because they've had a litter of puppies.
That was a really great message I hope everyone picks up on, of that you have to be very conscientious about how you as a person come off, because if they don't like you, they're automatically not going to like the entire message that you're sending, even if it's a good, humane, reasonable message. They will still ignore it and ignore the cause. And we don't want to send people further down the rabbit hole of the opposite direction. I also want to make sure people picked up on the fact that you mentioned, Pet Finder, which is a website that you can go to put in the breed, the age, the sex of the animal you want. And it's not just for dogs. It's for rabbits, ferrets, turtles. I mean, I have seen all kinds of animals on there. Many animals can be adopted. Besides dogs. Now, I know you do a great job at educating people. You go to events, you go to universities, you have volunteers that go to events. What do you find is a general response from people? Are they either educated, but they don't know how to take action? Do they not know about the problem at all? Or is it some other response that you typically get?
I would say it's kind of a mixture, but for the most part, we get people who are like, yeah, I've heard of puppy mills. And they talk to us for 30 seconds and they're like, oh, holy cow, that's awful. So they've heard the word puppy mill and they know a puppy mill is bad. but they don't quite realize that the problem is as rampant as it is, or that puppy mills are even legal. And one of the best ways that we've been able to educate is, I know you've seen them, but our puppy mill maps that can be found on our Facebook page or on our website. We did an event in Missouri about a month ago, and we had a huge map of Missouri, and we pinpointed all of the puppy mills. And we also had one for Kansas and Iowa at the same table. And people walk by, and they're like, holy cow, our state has the chicken pox. Like, what's going on? And so then I can say, well, actually, these are all of the known puppy mills in your state. And this is the issue. You know, in Missouri alone, there are over 800 puppy mills with almost 40,000 adult breeding dogs. And it baffles people. That's 40,000 adult breeding dogs kept in kennels their entire lives. These dogs are not pets. They're not loved. And so that really, really hits home for some people, especially in a world of animal lovers, when we go to like pet expos and things like that. But you're right. A lot of people, they hear this, they're shocked, they're sad, they're sickened, and then they walk away and they go on to the next, like, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to go get lunch, or, oh, it's time for ice cream. And they just kind of forget about the problem, which is why earlier I said we have to really, really remember that not everybody has an aha moment when we want them to. Personally, I bought my first dog from a Petland because I was that college girl who was homesick, and I kept, going into a local Petland, and they kept letting me play with the dog, and they gave me a credit card and everything to buy the dog, and they just made it so easy that I didn't even think twice about it. And I learned about puppy mills right then and there when I was 19, because the minute I took the dog home, there was a news story about puppy mills and about that Petland that I bought my dog from. So even at 19, I was shocked, I was sad, but I thought my poor dog might be sick. So I immediately went out and adopted a second dog, which, again, I was 19 and in college and in an apartment and probably shouldn't have had 2 huskies. But, whatever. So that wasn't even my aha moment. I knew about it then. I heard the word puppy mill. But it wasn't until 2 years later that I even started Bailing Out Benji. And so we have to remember that we all live with these blinders on.
So let's talk about, what kind of inspired you. I know you kind of just got into it there, but what really made Bailing Out Benji take off? I mean, you started this a number of years ago, and it's grown exponentially, but what have been like the defining moments in the beginning to help get this off the ground?
Well, again, as cheesy as this sounds, I think it is because we are just real people who want to help dogs. We are real people who will always, always choose to educate with kindness and compassion. Whether you're shouting at us, whether you don't believe us, whether you're bullying or harassing us, we are always going to persist because we're doing it for the dogs. And anyone who's known my personal journey over the last few years has known that when I first started Bailing Out Benji, I was very, very bullied. I was a young girl stepping into the rescue world. I was learning as I was teaching, as we all should be. You should be learning something new every day. I just kept hitting a wall with people who were older. They'd been doing this forever. They were experts in this, and there was no room for new ideas. There was no room for young people getting involved. I was the child at the table. And that was really hard for me to overcome, but I just kept doing it because it isn't about me, it's about the dogs. And so we just kept persisting, and we just kept gaining new followers because these are people who got that aha moment because we weren't, bashing them because they bought a dog, or we weren't upset that, no, they didn't know that chaining a dog is bad. Everybody needs to have that educational moment where we aren't judging them. If you go back to, elementary school and preschool, when you're trying to learn how to read and you're trying to learn how to do math and things like that, your teacher wasn't like, how dare you? Why don't you know this? What is going on? What's your problem? Or else you never would have thrived in school. And people kind of forget that it's the same for adults. You can talk to them. You basically get 30 seconds to educate somebody, and you're not going to make them care about it, but you can plant that seed and hope that that seed keeps growing. And so after, I started Bailing Out Benji and we were able to overcome this, one of the biggest obstacles I had to overcome was we had a local business who wanted to do a fundraiser for us. And at the time, I knew that I was going to do Iowa's first ever puppy mill awareness billboard on 2 buses here in Ames. But I knew that's what the funds was going for, and I didn't put that out there because I like things to be a surprise, which ended up being good because, long story, but the pet store ended up trying to fight our bus ads. But I wanted to make sure we had the funding first to do it. And so there were some women who were involved in rescue, and they kind of bashed us on social media, and they harassed the store until the store chose to not do our event. And that would have been a huge fundraiser for us to help with this first billboard that we'd ever done. And it was that moment where I was like, okay, I can either give up or I can say, go on, F everybody, keep going, just ignore the haters and just do this for the dogs. And so that was a really hard summer, but that was the moment where I knew that this was my passion, this is my road to success, this is what I'm going to do for the animals. And so I just kind of brushed everything off. And not even 4 months later, because we kept going, because we did the bus ad, because we kept protesting even when it was negatives, that's when the documentary reached out to us. And that was kind of that first pivotal moment where I realized we are bigger than other people want us to be, and that we are making a difference the way we are educating, even if it's not the same way other organizations do it. And so when Dog by Dog first emailed, and the director wanted to call me, I thought it was a prank. I really thought that one of those people that had been harassing me and bullying me, I had such low self-esteem at the time that I thought it was a joke. And so I took the call and I was like, oh yeah, whatever. Okay, I'll be in this documentary. And then I started researching the documentary more and I was like, oh my gosh, this is legit. And so 2 months later they came and they filmed our protest on one of the coldest days of the year. If you watch Dog by Dog, that's now on Netflix, Amazon Prime. You can buy it online at Walmart, Best Buy, and Target. But yeah, if you watch the film, you can actually see our breath as we're speaking because it was -14 that day. And we were there for 2 hours filming, and you could just see how cold we were. And every single time you hear us saying, we're out here because the dogs don't get a choice. We're out here protesting because those poor dogs are still living in those conditions, no matter how cold it is or rainy. And I really think that our persistence and our honor and our integrity is what has made Bailing Out Benji what it is today. Because you can't spend 5 minutes with one of our volunteers without realizing that this is our passion and this is our life and we're in it for the right reasons.
Absolutely. For those of you who are listening who have not seen Dog by Dog, I do want to stress that it is a non-graphic documentary. So if you are someone that is easily upset, this I think would still be an appropriate documentary. In my opinion, it was the first couple minutes where they show what a puppy mill looks like that was the saddest. But those pictures and video footage are no different than if you just do a Google search for a puppy mill. Of course, it's sad, but I don't think that it is graphic, and it's a very educational documentary that explores the relationships between these different institutions and the government. I definitely recommend that. Mindy is in the documentary. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the amazing things that have happened, because I think with great success is, of course, going to come, jealousy and hatred from unfortunately parts of the community. But you've been in Rolling Stone, you've been in Huffington Post now this year, you've won an award from the HSUS. What has that experience been like for you?
Again, it goes back to, I always think it's not really happening. It's so surreal. I was home one day, I had just gotten home from work and my phone rang, and it was Bailing Out Benji's phone. But it rang and I answered it, and this guy was like, hi, my name's Paul and I'm from the Rolling Stone. And I was like, haha, no, really, who are you? And he was like, my name's Paul and I'm with the Rolling Stone. And I was like, oh, hey, Paul, what do you want to talk about? And so he and I spoke on the phone for over an hour and a half about just puppy mills. And it was kind of like this. It wasn't really an interview. It was more him getting to know who I was and getting to know the industry. And this was a writer who heard about puppy mills. And instead of just, Googling it and writing a story, he went to dog auctions in Missouri. He approached breeders. He went hands-on with rescue with the HSUS. He did everything in the article but come and protest with us here in Iowa. And he really, really let this story captivate his life because he wanted to do the best thing for the dogs. And then it's this 7-page spread in the middle of the Rolling Stone magazine that literally anybody has access to. And I think that's been the most amazing thing of this year, of 2017, is that, Dog by Dog is out. It's literally at your fingertips if you want to click on Netflix and watch it. The Rolling Stone, who reads that? Celebrities read that. People read that. People in doctors' offices read that. It wasn't a necessarily like animal-themed article. It wasn't an animal-themed issue. But anybody could pick that up. And who was on the cover? It was Emma Stone. That was really, really cool that Emma Stone was on the cover, and it said right there next to her, inside of puppy mills. Flip through and you can learn about puppy mills. Like, people who had no idea about the issue picked up that article and got to read it. And that was really cool. And the same goes, with the Huffington Post article. Like, everybody reads the Huffington Post. A lot of people, see that, and they see that as a valid, trusted news source. And so when an article about puppy mills comes up, everybody's like, oh, I'm going to read it. This is interesting. And I think the headline of that one was, is there a puppy mill in your town? Which is really going to grab at you. You're like, oh, I wonder if there's one locally. So that was really cool. And even, I kind of want to avoid talking too much politics, but even the USDA blackout, as horrible as that was for advocates like us who use those inspection reports all the time on a daily basis, one great thing happened. And that's the fact that it got everybody talking about the USDA and their connection to puppy mills. When that happened back in late February, early March, you couldn't turn on the news without hearing somebody talking about the USDA blackout. Rachel Maddow did a wonderful story about that. Even this last week, Dr. Oz did a story about puppy mills. And so this is something that all of a sudden is more kind of mainstream. People are hearing that term, and now they just need that follow-up with us or with another organization about how bad the issue really is. And so 2017 so far, 4 months in, has been great for media exposure on this issue and on this industry.
Absolutely. So I know you're based out of Iowa, but the organization has actually been spreading to different states, including you've got Texas, Pennsylvania, you've got Southern California. So if someone lives in one of these states, what can they do to help you? Or if they don't live in one of those states, what are some other options that they have for supporting your organization, supporting you?
So if you go to our Facebook page or our website, you can see all of the teams that we have, or all the states that we have teams in. And they're kind of like us, where as much as people are like, wow, you guys are so huge, wow, you guys are a national organization, we are really small teams of 5 to 10 volunteers in each state. So here in Iowa, we're based out of the Ames and Des Moines area. And we travel all over the state, but Iowa is relatively small, so we have that option. In Nebraska, we are based out of the Omaha and Lincoln area because Nebraska is pretty big. And so every little state that we're in kind of one pocket of that. But if you go to our website, you can reach out to our Facebook pages, all the volunteer Facebook pages. You can reach out by email. And we're always in need of people. Here in Iowa especially, since we were the first organization of Bailing Out Benji, the first team, we are doing events every single weekend. We have 2 protests every weekend, peaceful, of course. We do transports. We get puppy mill surrenders. Then we do other events. Like yesterday, we were at a humane pet store who wanted us to be there to educate their customers about puppy mills. And in Texas, we're in like the Austin area. And those girls have done a wonderful job at getting in their hometown. And they're trying to pass a retail ban, which is every team kind of has their own goal and their own agenda. But they really, really want a retail ban in their town because they have a pet store that's selling puppies from puppy mills. And the pet store itself is USDA licensed, and they've had violations. And so these are just ordinary people who decided this was it. They had their aha moment, and they wanted to take a stand against puppy mills. And so we find a way for you to help no matter what you are comfortable doing. So we have one woman here in Iowa who isn't a fan of social media, and so she's been turned away by quite a few other organizations because social media is the thing. That's what you're on. It's very hard to stay in touch if you're not on Facebook, is what she was always told. So she's actually one of our best volunteers. She found out that, she and I can communicate very easily by email or text message. And she has a neighbor who's also not on social media, who now sews blankets for all the puppy mill survivors we rescue. Diana goes to local businesses and gets donations for us. She protests with us. She found kind of her niche in this, and now she's our thank you writer. So she decided that she would love to be in charge of writing all of our thank you notes, and that's something that she took off my plate. We have other volunteers who aren't comfortable speaking to people, so their passion, their way to help is going around their town and hanging up flyers on the local community boards or putting them in the little free libraries. Easy things like that. Everybody can help. All you have to do is reach out, and we'll find a way for you to help, no matter what state you're living in.
Wow, that's great. That's really great advice for people. I know you touched on protesting for a minute there, and I kind of want to dig deeper into that because people get this idea in their head when they think of protesting, especially when it comes to quote-unquote animal rights. So what have you done to combat that stereotype? So what does protesting mean for you? You get up in the morning, it's a weekend, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, you're going to protest. What does that actually entail? What does that look like?
Well, I'm actually going to go protest the minute we're done recording. So what I'll do is, you and I will end, and then I'll probably go grab a coffee because it's really chilly today. It's been raining for about 2 days, and it's only like not even 40 degrees. So it's right on that rainy, snowy side. And I literally take my signs and I go stand on the sidewalk, and I've met my very, very best friends on that sidewalk. When people think of protesting, they think of people shouting, and they think of people waving signs at you. And if you were to just walk by our protest and not say a word to us, we would say good morning or hello, and then we would continue our conversation. The one thing that people really like about us is that, yes, we're there educating about puppy mills, but we are not shoving our agenda into someone's face or down their throat because, again, like I told you, nobody's had that aha moment yet. The people that have stop and talk to us, or the people that want to know more stop and talk to us. But for the most part, you get people who read our signs, and then they Google us. And I can tell they Google us because my website tells me. They Googled Divig's Pet Shop Puppy Mills. And so then they come across our articles and they learn. Or they send us an email and they say, hey, I saw you. I was too scared to say something. Can we talk about the puppy mill industry? And so, we literally, our volunteers, whether it's 2 of us or 10 of us, we stand there and we laugh and we talk. And we just kind of send this vibe out that we're real people and that we're not scary because we are laughing. Vicky, my very, very best friend, she's at almost every single protest. She's like in her 70s. And she has this laugh that is so contagious that we know every time she laughs, the pet store inside, they're cringing because we're having fun. We're doing our thing outside of their store, and it's not about them, it's about the dogs. And so it's been great that people come up and they're like, hey, why are you guys here? Because we're happy and we're smiling and we're not yelling at people. And that's kind of the biggest thing. You want to make sure, again, that everybody's starting at 0. No one knows about puppy mills like we do. Nobody hears about this term every single day like we do. So we need to start at base 1. What is a puppy mill and how they can help? And we've had tremendous success with that. We protest Divig's Pet Shop here in Ames, and we've been protesting them for 5.5 years. And the 2 puppy mills that they've used, or that they are using, when we first started, had over 400 adult dogs on their property at a time, each. And so that was 800 breeding dogs supplying one pet store. And the pet store itself used to have dozens of puppies in the window. Well, after, we tried to reach out to him and the owner had no interest in going humane or stopping selling puppies, we started our protest. We knew that's what we had to do, even though it wasn't in my comfort zone. I never thought I'd be that girl protest holding a sign. But here we are every single weekend, twice a weekend doing that. And because of our efforts, Divig's, who used to sell dozens of puppies a week, now sells 2 or 3 a month. And the 2 puppy mills have downsized from over 400 adult dogs each to one has 150 adult dogs and one has 175. And so we're seeing the direct correlation between supply and demand. if people are walking past the store and they're not buying puppies, Divig's orders less next week, and then they order less the week after and the week after. So then the puppy mill sees it in the pocketbook. They're not selling as many puppies, so they are downsizing. They're, whether they're surrendering their dogs or selling their dogs off, they're getting rid of some of their adult dogs, and their breeding facility is a lot smaller now, meaning they can't supply as many puppies online as they were.
It's progress. I know you're not going to stop until that number hits zero. With Divig, let's kind of talk about your steps here. You didn't start off immediately by trying to make this enemy, trying to go and protest. You started off by trying to facilitate a conversation and work with someone to change their business model, it sounds like, to be more humane, and got resistance, and therefore that resulted in, well, if you're not going to work to be more humane, we're going to have to expose the type of cruelty you support.
Absolutely. And again, it was very much when I asked him where he got his dogs, and he told me because at the time he wasn't being protested, so he had nothing to hide. And so I went and made an appointment, and I visited one of the puppy mills. And when I say visited, I mean they show you what they want to show you. And this is where a lot of the public is getting tripped up. So I went to their office, on their property, and they brought out a ton of puppies. And here I was, I was 21, but they thought I had just graduated high school. And I was with an older friend of mine, and I wanted a puppy, supposedly. And so I'm playing with these puppies, and what they showed me was a row of 15 to 20 pure white Bichons. Beautiful, very well cared for Bichons. But they were still living in an outdoor kennel. And so they're like, these are our mothers, and some of the fathers, they're very, very sweet. We take care of them. They're our pets. We love them. And so I went to pet one. I remember going to stick my fingers near the cage. And Deb, the owner of the puppy mill, Deb Myers, was like, oh, no, don't do that. We feed them hot dogs, and they might think your finger's a hot dog, and they might bite your finger. And that was like red flag number one. I was like, well, okay, no dog is going to bite your finger off if you go to pet it. Especially when they had just given me this long spiel about how they have great temperaments and how the dogs are all, beautiful and vet checked. Well, I had already done my research, and I knew that they had 400 dogs on the property. And so I asked, I was like, do you have any other dogs I can see? And they pointed to a barn, like a Quonset building, a Morton building. And they were like, oh, those are the honeymoon suites. You don't want to go in there. It's very, very romantic in there. And I was like, okay.
That is so bizarre.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay. But like I said, I already knew. So the public going to their property to do their research and to ask to see the parents, they're given this row of beautiful white dogs, and they're not seeing the 350 other dogs on the property. So I ended up saying, I am actually interested in an older dog. And we talked, and I ended up getting an older dog from them, an older breeding dog. She was only 2.5, and she'd already dropped her uterus during her last birth. And so they had to do an emergency C-section right there on the property, which is illegal and painful. And I was able to get the dog a week after, and I put her into rescue. So little Marley, the King Charles Cavalier, she was my very first puppy mill rescue that I did. But I went back to Divig's after this whole experience, and I was like, did you know that these are puppy mills? Did you know about the violations? Like, innocent, naive Mindy Callison, I thought he had no idea. And he immediately shut me down. He was like, they're fine. This is our third pet store. We've been using them for 30 years. Drop it. And I was like, oh, well, it's not fine. Those dogs are suffering. Like, that's a lot of dogs on that property. So, no, that's not fine. And I was like, I would love to help you go humane. And he was like, no, we're not interested. Thanks. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to do something. I can't just sit back and see what you're doing. And so that's kind of when our protest started. And we waited until Black Friday, because that's when people really start thinking about Christmas puppies. And every few weeks I would send the store an email or a letter in the mail, and I would say, that we're protesting your store. We really want to partner with you. Would you consider having rescue animals in your store? And then I was told, no, rescue dogs bite. That could be a lawsuit. I want nothing to do with it. And then I was told, oh no, rescue dogs are too big. My store can't fit that. It was just every excuse in the book. And so the very last ditch effort I did was I went around Ames, and a lot of our supporters are obviously here in our hometown. And I got these people to sign something, and it had their first name, how many dogs or how many animals they had at their home, and about how much they spent on pet supplies and pet food and everything a month. And I handed it to him. And this was like, the total was like $15,000 to $20,000 between all of us who were willing to support his store if he would stop selling puppies. And he still said no, because at that point we had been protesting for a while, and he didn't want to admit that he was doing something wrong. And so even when we brought in an extra way for him to get money, all of these new customers, he wanted nothing to do with it. And so, now we just kind of peacefully protest, and we educate about where his, puppies come from. And we know that his store is taking a big hit, and it's sad. We don't want to see a local business go away, but we also want to make sure that the products we're getting are coming humanely. No one would willingly buy, a shirt or shoes or whatever, knowing that it came from a child slave somewhere. That's a whole nother topic, and I know people still do, but we're in this society where we're becoming more aware about where our products are coming from. People are either becoming vegetarian or vegan, or they're really researching where their food is coming from, and they're trying to make sure they get grass-fed meat or cage-free, farm-raised eggs, things like that. We're in this society where people are becoming more aware, and that's the first step. We just need to keep helping them become more aware without guilting them to doing what we want them to do.
Right. Issues are becoming a lot more transparent. I know I don't want to spend too much time talking about Divix, because he's, he's not been the nicest to you.
No. No.
And he's certainly spread a lot of lies. But I know before he actually, I don't know if he still does, but he used to call the police, and you're not violating any law. So I just want to make sure people know about their rights when they go and speak out against a business. What have you found are your rights as a protester?
Well, I've helped actually start, thanks to Dog by Dog, we've done screenings all over the country, and I've helped other organizations or other groups of people start their own peaceful protests. We just did a huge peaceful protest last weekend in Omaha at 2 pet stores. We had 30 volunteers. It was amazing. But what I want people to realize is, yes, my rights were challenged. Dale Divig tried to make protesting illegal in the city of Ames. He got a measly little petition with a few hundred signatures of all of his workers, all of his family members. Almost everybody had the same last name, and nobody was in Ames. The addresses on the form were just silly. But he took it to city council, and he took it to the city, the local Ames Main Street Cultural District. He was trying every way to get us removed from that sidewalk. And so the minute it hit the city council, I didn't have to do anything. The local ACLU chapter emailed me, and they were like, hey, we've got this. Like, if this goes to any sort of actual vote, or if you're going to be sued, we'll back you. And so that's kind of something I tucked in my back pocket. Like, I didn't tell anyone that, but we've been doing this long enough that we knew our rights. We contacted the city, and they told us, you have to stay on public property. You cannot block the street. You cannot physically stop someone from entering the store. And on our end, again, we're always peaceful. So you see protests on the news where people have megaphones. If I wanted to have a megaphone and march up and down the sidewalk and make a scene, I absolutely could. That's my right. But you're going to turn more people away from that. And so I would 100%, if you're interested in starting a protest in your town, email the city manager first and see if there's any regulation on it, because you do have to make sure that you're staying on the sidewalk, on public sidewalk. If it's at a mall, you can't go right up to the doors unless you have the mall's approval. Our volunteer team in Southern California, they're able to protest right in the store, right in the mall, right outside of a pet store that sells puppy mill dogs. And so they just have educational tables with flyers and our maps and things like that. And they have big signs. And so they're able to educate people walking through the mall. And that's really cool. But you always have to ask, and you have to make sure that you are following the local laws when it comes to that. But if you're interested, again, go to the ACLU's website. They have wonderful, wonderful resources for anybody who wants to exercise their First Amendment right, whether it's for the dogs or, you're marching for science or for women's rights or whatever you're marching for. Just go to the ACLU's website and you can find out what locally you can do.
That's really great. Can you tell me about a dog that I know you've done transport, you've done foster, you've done rescue, just a dog that their story has really stuck with you and why that is? Just, how this has made such an impact on you and is the reason you get up and do this every day.
Well, I have my own puppy mill survivor, and she's my rock. She's the dog, sorry. I mean, I love my dogs. They're my people. But she's the thing that keeps me going. Every night when I go to bed, she snuggles in between me and my husband. And I know that that's a life she wouldn't have had without us. Her name is Lola. She was rescued at 18 months old, and she'd already had 3 litters of puppies. And Lola wasn't a surrender. She was an auction dog. And as an 18-month-old puppy, purebred black lab, I was very fearful that she was going to get into the wrong hands. And so I bid on her, even though I wasn't there to buy dogs. And I got her that day, and she's been with us since. But watching her become a real dog has been crazy. Her first walk on a leash, her first sprint in the backyard because she felt grass for the first time. The first time she was able to walk up the stairs by herself was huge. Just all of that, these little mile markers and these successes we get to celebrate with her because it's a life that she never had. She was born in one puppy mill here in Iowa, sold to another puppy mill, and bred until we got her. And there was another story that I always think about. His name was Bosley. He was at a dog auction again, and it was one in Nebraska, and all the dogs were going very, very cheap. And I walked up, and he was in his kennel, and he was just crying. And I stuck my hands in the kennel, which, you don't always want to do. But he started, licking my fingers and sucking on my fingers and crying. And I knew that he wasn't a puppy mill dog. I knew that he wasn't a dog that had been trapped in a puppy mill his whole life. He wasn't broken. He was scared. He had no idea why he was in this kennel. And so as the auction went on, the auctioneer said that this dog had never had a litter. He was male. They tested his semen, and he could produce. He could have as many puppies as he wants, but he hasn't had a litter yet, and they're not sure why. So this poor dog had been through 3 dog auctions, not sold. He had lived at the facility. He was just an unaltered dog that kind of wound up in this facility, and I really, really believe that it was a dog that was given away for free. And so anyway, I bid on Bosley. I got Bosley. He went to my friends at an English Bulldog rescue, and he immediately started flourishing. But even to this day, it's been 3 years, he still has nightmares when he's sleeping. And he cries, and he wakes up and he has to find his people and sleep in bed with them. And it's sad what is being done to these dogs. But Bosley, he's the one thing I did right. He really, really cemented it for me that we have to be their voice and we have to get these dogs out of there however we can.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, I just want to touch on the myths of shelter animals, which you kind of talked about earlier, and the excuses of why pet stores won't change their model. We know there's over 6.5 million animals entering shelters every year, according to the ASPCA. With that, 1.5 million shelter animals are getting euthanized. I know about 25% of shelter pets are purebred, which is why a lot of people choose to go to breeders. And I believe the average age is around 18 months. So these myths about shelter dogs are really driving people to breeders and pet stores. And the myths are just that, they are lies. Are there any other myths you hear a lot about, whether about shelter dogs or anything that's just not true?
Well, I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of young college girls, and so I get to talk about puppy mills all the time and educate about, when they're ready for a dog, where they can get them. And just 2 weeks ago, I had one that was like, well, I really want to adopt a dog, but I don't want a dog that's been abused. I don't want a dog that's been scared of me. And, in our world, you see a lot of that on Facebook and in social media. You see the dog that's been abused its whole life. You see the dog that's been chained its whole life, or the cat that's been living alone. Not every animal in a shelter or rescue had a bad life. A lot of them are just dogs that were strays. They were lost and they found the shelter or rescue, or for whatever reason their family could not keep them. And so I think one of the biggest myths is every animal in a shelter or rescue has this sob story, and they have this thing that they're not going to be able to overcome, these trust issues or these behavior issues, and that's not the case. Animals in shelters and rescues are just like animals in your house. These are just little breathing heartbeats that want to be loved. It doesn't matter. Take it from me, someone who's rescued dogs from all types of situations. They're so forgiving. I can pull a dog straight out of a puppy mill and they immediately know you're different, and their tails wag a little bit, just a little bit, and they give you a look, and yes, it's scared, but they know you're different. And so while a lot of people are afraid that they're getting a broken dog by adopting, it's not the case. Dogs don't live in the past. They live in the moment, and they just want a human. And they just want you to open your bed to them, open your house to them, and love them like they deserve to be loved.
Absolutely. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I actually used to work in a shelter doing adoptions specifically, and we would have so many dogs and cats and other animals that come in because, someone got divorced or someone moved or lost a job. It had nothing to do with the medical or behavioral issues of the dog. And these are dogs that, they're often already trained. They know sit, they might know leave it, lay down. They know how to interact with kids, adults, other pets. And these dogs are essentially ready to go. And we talked earlier about instant gratification. I mean, you can't get anything better than that. With puppies, I love puppies, love all animals, but it's a lot of time and effort and finances that go into, training a dog in the right way, obviously doing positive reinforcement work. But these dogs are ready to go. I mean, they are ready to be in your house. They already know the basic commands. They just need a bed to sleep in, someone to take them on walks, and you feed them, and that's it.
Exactly. And honestly, a lot of the dogs, especially the purebred dogs or the designer dogs we're seeing in these shelters and rescues, they are coming from families that bought a puppy. They wanted that cute pet store puppy or that puppy that was on that cute website. And then it got to their house and they're like, holy cow, this is a newborn. It cries, it poops, it pees. It's not trained. And so these families are getting frustrated because they took in a puppy and they had no idea what that really entailed. So you're getting young dogs surrendered to rescues and shelters because the family just couldn't, they don't have time for it now. They didn't realize how much time it would take to have a newborn puppy in their house. And so, always give those pets a chance. If you are looking for a dog, go to petfinder.com, go to adoptapet.com, and just browse through whatever breed you want. Because if you want a Siberian Husky, there is a Siberian Husky rescue in your state. If you want a Bashan, check out Facebook because there is a Bashan rescue in your area. You just need to look, and you need to make sure that you are getting a dog for the right reason.
Yeah, it's as easy as doing a Google search for, your state, the breed you want, adoption, rescue, that's it. Checking out county shelters, humane societies, and also there's a lot of foster-based rescue organizations. Ohio has Central Ohio Pomeranian Rescue, and they rescue small breeds, which are typically bought from pet stores. And these are dogs that people really want, a Pomeranian, a Chihuahua, whatever small dog they want. And they go and they rescue them from owner surrenders, from puppy mills. So there's so many more rescues that exist that are beyond the physical building. They're fostered throughout the state or throughout multiple states, and they'll really work with you to make sure that it's the right fit. So definitely, looking up your state and the breed you want, and just making sure you put those keywords like rescue or adoption in there is helpful. Do you have any last word of advice for people who either want to support you or want to adopt a dog or anything else like that?
Well, I would say, of course, check us out on social media. Bailing Out Benji has a Facebook page and Instagram and Twitter, and we also have our website. And if nothing else, if you're hearing this and you want to make a change but you don't know how, go to our website and find your state in our puppy mill maps and share it. Or find a state you visited and share it. Like I said, nobody realizes that this problem is in their own backyard. And simply by sharing the puppy mill map for Missouri, you're sparking that conversation, and who knows how many people that will reach. And don't ever, ever, ever underestimate your voice, because one person really can make a difference in this fight.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much, Mindy. I really appreciate your time today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
That concludes my interview with Mindy Callison, founder and president of Bailing Out Benji. You can visit them at bailingoutbenji.com or check them out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Don't forget to check out Dog by Dog on Netflix or Amazon. If you are inspired by Mindy and want to support her mission and help her rescue dogs or educate the public further, consider making a donation. If you do end up donating or even liking them on Facebook, let them know you found out about them through the Cruelty-Free Claudia podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast episode, please leave a good review wherever you heard this podcast. If you like bonus features, access to polls, or you'd like your question and name featured on this podcast with one of our guests, you can become a Patreon patron by going to patreon.com/crueltyfreeclaudia. Rewards start at just $1 a month. This allows me to dedicate time to do research and conduct interviews, as well as promote the podcast to educate and inspire more people like yourself. Thank you.